And he said, my great friend Max Beckmann has died. And Peter answered, and this is written down by his mother, but he was my friend too, and was in floods of tears.
Probably because we've been to the chimpanzee show together.
Next, I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel, which is from left to right: Paul Germer, art critic, journalist, author, and New Yorker. Professor Barbara Bunge, Professor Emeritus of the University of Wisconsin at Madison, kindly stepped in for Anja Tiedemann, who couldn't be here tonight, but you know everything there is to know about Max Beckmann, and has written extensively about the artist. Richard Feigen doesn't need any more introduction, I believe. Sabine Riewald, Jacques and Natasha Gelman, curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Glitter and Doom, Beckmann in New York, and is now moving on to George Gross in 2021, is that correct? And Belinda Rathbone is a distinguished art historian and author of the Boston Raphael. And my first question, I have to read them, otherwise I can't remember. We have many topics to touch, and if time allows, we will take questions from the audience after. Let's start by looking at the 1926 masterpiece, Die Barke, which is hanging up here. Painted upon Puppa and Max Beckmann's return from their honeymoon. And Richard, we'd like to know from you the story about this picture. When did you buy it, and how did that come to pass? Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, I got calls from Stephen Lackner, who was Beckmann's friend and who basically supported him a lot and had this large Beckmann collection. And he called me every now and then with a Beckmann to sell. And they were usually rather insignificant paintings. And I said to him, Stephen, look, I have Beckmanns. If you ever can offer me a really important one, call me. But otherwise, these rather ordinary pictures are not of interest. So one day he called me and he said, all right, Richard, you said to call you if I had an important Beckmann to sell. And I have one. I'll tell you what it is, and I'll tell you the price, and I don't want any offers. It's yes or no. I said, okay, fair enough. So he called me up about the Bark, which is a sort of legendary picture, which was hanging in the National Gallery in Berlin. It was given to them in 1926 by a group of friends of Julius Mayer-Graffa, the great art historian, on his 60th birthday. And it was there until 1933. Then it was taken down with all the other Beckmanns by the Nazis. And Lackner acquired it. Lackner had it all those years. And then finally, when he called me up and said, all right, Richard, look, price is $30,000 and no offers. It's yes or no.
You're making everyone dizzy with that price.
What year was this?
This was January of 58.
Can I add something to it, Richard? That painting was acquired as it was gifted by the friends of the National Gallery in Berlin, but it was hung only in 1933 in a room devoted to Beckmann, and that was a huge, huge honor for a living artist to have an entire room at the National Gallery devoted to him. By the way, in my catalogue I show a photograph of the room, and the painting had a beautiful slim frame. It looked No, can I just... So after 6 months, the room had to be shut down because of the Entartete Kunst, the Trended Kunst. And then the picture was Justi had to resign, then there came another director and then another director, and they asked Beckmann if they could trade, if he could give them another painting. So Beckmann gave a very boring picture of a stable with a cow or something, and a still life, which they also didn't hang. So they gave the picture back to Beckmann, and it stayed with Beckmann, and he brought it to America, because Stephen Lackner by that time was already in America, and he sold it to Stephen Lackner in 1946, and you were the lucky one to buy it from Stephen Lackner. And thank God that the painting was given back to Beckmann, because otherwise we wouldn't see it. It wouldn't live anymore.
Excellent. My next question goes to Belinda, who is Kwapie Beckmann's goddaughter, which is an extraordinary experience. And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your relationship, and if you have any insights into Max and Kwapie's relationship, which would be very interesting.
My parents asked Kwapie to be my godmother was that Max Beckmann died the year I was born. So I never knew him. My older brother Peter did, and my sister Eliza, who's also here, well, certainly was in the same room with him at some point. But anyway, Kwapie was a model godmother. She was the sweetest person and extremely considerate, protective in a way. I would come and visit her occasionally in New York. I'd come down from Boston and stay with her at 171 West 71st Street, in her really quite grand apartment there, and surrounded with Beckmann's, of course. And the corner of Broadway and 71st Street was not a very salubrious neighborhood at the time. So it was a little bit scary, not to mention New York is scary to a child. But she took me to the circus because that was in honor of Max. She loved to go, and she held on to me very hard as we walked down the street. And I guess, in a way, that is a way of saying, I think she was protective of Max, too. This is what she did. Among other things, she was his translator in America. She was his muse, of course, as we all know. And I think she didn't have the slightest shred of regret for giving up her own career as a concert violinist.
That was going to be my next question.
I'd love to hear what other people think.
Yes.
I think it's a very interesting relationship, which is she enabled him to be the great artist he was.
Yeah, I was reading that not only that, but he also made it a condition that he could see his first wife after he got married to his second wife. Hello? Okay. So the condition was that he could continue seeing his first wife and travel with her. There are pictures apparently that
Very liberal-minded, yes.
yes, very liberal-minded. And I think Barbara has some insights into pictures that were signed Paris with Minna.
It wasn't. I don't think it was quite written that he could travel with his first wife, but they met. They had rendezvous in Paris, and there's at least one watercolor signed in memory of our good time in Paris. And he would write Kwapie, "I'm staying at this hotel," but he was staying at another hotel, and he would meet her. And he continued. Minna was the first wife, and he continued to be in contact with her. And he was planning to go back to Germany in 1950 and was hoping to meet up with Minna again. But then the Korean War broke out, and he was afraid it was going to be World War III, so they did not go back. So he was on good terms with her. But Kwapie was 20 years younger than he was. was. And she, as her own mother, was 20 years younger than her husband. And he was absolutely devoted to her, and he treasured her. She was extremely well trained as a musician. And in fact, she did continue to play, actually after his death, but she played actually chamber music in Berlin too. And she joined actually, I think, a sort of semi-professional orchestra in New York after his death. So, and she actually trained as a singer, but she was equally gifted as a fiddler.
Very interesting. Another relationship that I think is worth exploring a little bit is that to his to Goebel, who wrote the catalogue Raisonné, and his widow passed away recently, and she bequeathed a very beautiful self-portrait to the National Gallery in Berlin, and some graphic works. And I would like to tell us a little bit about the Goebel couple and Beckmann.
Okay, I'll be glad to. I also want to say I am not Anya Tiedemann, who could not make it because she was ill, but Anya is producing a new edition of the Erber catalog, and she said to tell you all of her regrets that she could not come. And she does want to get in contact with all those who own Beckmann paintings, and there is a form she would like people to fill out. You've got some forms, and so she can get in contact and get photos of all these works. But anyway, the Goebbels produced this catalog in 1976. Erhard Goebbels was trained as an art historian in Netherlandish art, and he met Beckmann already in the 30s in Paris, and he was the only person to write an article on Beckmann when he turned 50 years old in 1934 in Germany. But Goebbels quickly, he was a young man, he was just finishing his dissertation, he was writing, and as necessitated by living in Nazi Germany, you had to join, of course, the chamber for writers, the Nazi chamber. He was not a Nazi, but he became involved in the operations for the Linz Museum, which was buying works of art for Hitler, this great project that Hitler had envisioned. And he'd been already in the Netherlands as a student, and he was there in the late 30s and then the 40s. And in that capacity, he also met the Beckmanns frequently. And from the Netherlands, he both collected works, he bought works from Jews who were leaving, or trying to leave the Netherlands. He bought them at not very high prices. He extorted funds, we now know. He was not engaged in pretty things always. At the same time, he helped the Beckmanns a great deal. He gave them money, he gave them food, and he took Beckmann's works back to Germany. He also helped bring a series of works, the Apocalypse series, for Georg Hartmann. That was a private commission. Beckmann did not know who commissioned that in Frankfurt, but Goebbels went back and forth working with that series. So after the war, Goebbels went back to Germany. He could not be employed by the Munich Museum, which is interesting because some people who were involved with the party did continue to work in the Munich Museum, but because Goebbels was heavily involved in things, he would not be hired. He met his wife Barbara, who was someone I knew very well. I never knew Erhard Goebbels. She was a charming woman, very talented as a writer, and they married in the 50s, and together they produced this gigantic Erber catalog. In fact, Erhard was sick the last 10 years of his life, and Barbara did quite a bit of work on that Erber catalog to bring it together. And so, since she came from Berlin originally, she wanted to make this gift of a self-portrait. Her husband was one of the many works he bought from Beckmann in the occupied Netherlands. And then he had also commissioned a portrait of himself by Beckmann, and then another work as well as the leather drawings and paintings. So she made this gift, it was just announced at the end of February, and it was immediately overshadowed by the history of her husband. So these works are going to go on exhibit in Berlin in the fall, and the museum has said, well, we'll have a whole text, explaining what Goebbels was and what he did, that one cannot just hang these and look at them without thinking about who Gerhard Goebbels was and what he did.
I have a question, though. What I find fascinating about this gentleman is that on one level he was working for Nazis and getting all these beautiful paintings from Jews everywhere for Linz. And these were probably old masterpieces, I assume. Yes. And then on the other hand, he was dealing with almost clandestinely this degenerate artist on the other side. So I think it's fascinating that he could do both at the same time and appreciate Beckmann, but also follow the winds of the party.
Yes, and Quappy writes. Quappy kept not one but two diaries. She didn't want Max to read everything she was writing.
She's a very smart lady.
And yes, and so she writes. He's coming. He's going to help us. We're very thankful. But she writes that we talk about her works of art, and they felt that Goebbels understood Max's work very well, and they enjoyed discussing. And when he finally left after the invasion, they cried at their party. And so it's a real divide.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'd love to talk about the self-portraits. Beckmann painted 80, Rembrandt painted 100, and Sabine, you will know how many Schiele and people like that painted. But why 80 self-portraits? And the question that all of you
It's an impossible question to answer. Had he lived 30 more years, he would have painted 120. So, I mean, Schiele painted 170 and he died when he was 28. But what is interesting that Beckmann never painted himself with the tools of his trade, never with a paintbrush, never with a palette, never in front of a canvas. He played roles. You see, he is the sort of businessman smoking a cigar. He is a sort of seedy nightclub owner, and the one that I had in my exhibition in front of a red curtain. And he always gave these self-portraits to Quappy. And then after she had it for a while, he would say, well, I'm so sorry, but there is somebody who wants to buy it. I paint you another one. So that he painted and painted and painted, but he was taking stock of himself. And whenever he came to a different, he painted self-portraits already when he was very young.
So
What?
Paul might enlighten us between the difference between Beckmann's self-portraits and Rembrandt's self-portraits. How do you see that?
No, actually, I want to say something else before
Okay,
I
well,
talk
say
about that.
what you want.
One of the things about Beckmann's self-portraits that fascinates me is some years ago I went to St. Louis for an exhibition on Beckmann in Paris, which was a fantastic exhibition. I actually hadn't seen many Beckmanns until that exhibition, and was totally blown away by him. Thought he was a fantastic painter, very underrated. And they had, as part of the press sort of promotional things, they had a DVD of, I don't know how they got it, Beckmann's home movies in Paris. And you saw these home movies, and usually people are, in home movies, they're all like looking at the camera and waving, hi, hi, and they're kind of boring. But then Beckmann comes on the screen, and this man had unbelievable charisma. You saw him on the screen, and this man could have been a movie star. He had such incredible film presence. Photographed well. He must have been an overwhelmingly charismatic person in real life. He must have been, another reason why he probably did these self-portraits was, he probably knew he had these qualities. And he was no shrinking violet. No, definitely not. So, good, strong ego and healthy ego.
He seemed to have been very intimidating because there are stories because the publisher of the Frankfurter Zeitung gave lunches, and to these lunches came businessmen, architects, musicians, everybody who was anything of the Frankfurt period at that time. And Beckmann was often at these lunches, and he was described as just sitting there and staring and saying, yes, no. He would not take part in conversations, and he intimidated people. because he just didn't feel he had to talk. He just sat there and observed.
What did your parents say about his personality, Belinda?
I was just thinking of reading something that is from my father's introduction to the show that Museum of Modern Art put on in the 1960s. And he quotes from, well, he tells a lot of interesting reminiscences about Max and his personality and the adventures they had, the nightlife and so on, which Sabine quoted from in her book. But he also quotes from the Taga book, and I think this is interesting in terms of how was he somebody who was actually rather the one who was terrified rather than terrifying, which is sometimes how that works. So my father organized a big retrospective in St. Louis in 1948, and in order to show St. Louis and America what they had, this treasure in Max Beckmann, and it was a traveling show, went on for over a year. And now I'm going to find it. But he didn't like the press. I don't think Max Beckmann enjoyed the press, and oh dear, this is terrible.
Perhaps later.
Yeah.
Later.
Yeah.
Let us know when you find
Okay.
it. Okay. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the changing techniques of the 1920s. And we have pictures ranging from the 20s to 1948 in the exhibition, so it's a very good range that we can study here in this wonderful exhibition. You found it?
I did. Can I just?
Let's go for it.
Okay. So the exhibition. This is Max Beckmann writing in his Tagebuch. Then exhibition again. Lecture by Perry. Oh God, my own life passed before me in pictures, like a dream accompanied by Perry's voice and slides. I had to bow, oh God, and receive approval, oh God. Mr. Beckmann was applauded. He sounds like somebody who really enjoyed the limelight that much.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Yes?
CB, didn't you say that when Beckmann was he loved going out in New York nightlife, and he basically sort of stayed apart from everything. He went to clubs, but didn't really get sort of listened, and didn't make a lot of whoopee, as they said. You know what I mean?
Well, he was an observer.
He was an observer.
The same thing as in Frankfurt, when he would go to the train station and sit there and see life moving by. He did the same in New York. He went to high dives or low dives. He liked to go to the plaza and drink champagne, and he liked to go to another very fancy restaurant, or he liked to go to the Lower East Side, to the Bowery, whatever, and observe. I quoted that long part from Perry Rathbone, where I thought Perry Rathbone suffered because he had to go with Beckmann to these low dives, and it took hours and hours, and he said Beckmann was just there, riveted, saying yes, yes, and showing and pointing to it, and it lasted for hours. And I don't think your father sort of was a habitué of these low dives.
So let's hear Richard's opinion about Perry, because you know him best probably in this particular room.
Well, I always considered Perry Rathbone really the most important museum director in the world. He was the ideal museum director.
Two men, Perry and Max, who had extraordinary personalities and were both very charismatic, to be such good friends, because often, larger than life personalities, that is not always the case, I think.
Well, I think that he really enjoyed. I was under the impression that he enjoyed these.
Evenings going out on the town with Max. What do you think?
Even to the dives downtown?
I think so.
Okay, well, great. Well, now let's
I mean, he
talk
wouldn't have gone by
Very
himself, but
curious, and I think about all sorts of things and all sorts of people. So I think he probably, this is what we're going to do. Maybe we didn't engage in a lot of conversation with Max, because Max was just observing, but down there, and maybe several hours, was several visits over the years, where they're just traveling in Europe to the museum or whatever, where he would just get himself involved in situations which were unusual and certainly off the beaten track, and then we'd hear about what he lost or what this happened or what happened. So I think I have the sense that he would enjoy that those were part of the adventure. That was part of a learning experience for him too, and to do it with Max. He's probably very. This is really, we don't get to do that every day with an artist, especially one like him.
Thank you.
One of the things about Beckmann, he was talking about how what a great craftsman he was and how he knew how to paint, so the pictures would be beautifully preserved. I think that's also part of Beckmann's generation of training in sort of the classical tradition of knowing how to paint rather than just slop paint on the canvas. There's never anything arbitrary about that. About Beckmann's pictures. It's all very well thought of, very well thought out. And I think one of the things that, for artists of Beckmann's generation who were trained in the classical tradition, Beckmann and Picasso, for instance, they knew how to construct a painting. The way a composition of like a classical composition would be painted, like Death of Dramatics, like Poussin or something like that. But because they knew how to construct a painting effectively, they knew how to deconstruct the painting effectively. So when you look at a Beckmann, the composition everything is very deliberately put down. It's not, your eye is following certain, like in this position, you're in the boating, your eye is totally drawn up to this figure of the women on the boat. It isn't just, you're directed, this whole sort of the way these legs and arms are they're like little pathways up the whole canvas. And that's definitely, he will do a landscape and you'll see the way he's constructed the landscape is very deliberate. Everything is, you may look at it at first glance and say, oh, it's just these black lines and color element. But it's all very, very carefully put together, very carefully reconstructed, very carefully constructed. And also the other thing about Beckmann in that case is he used triptychs, which was a very early artist who did triptychs in the Renaissance. But also with that generation, is that generation of artists who used that form, which was an archaic form in many ways in the early part of the 20th century, and revived it.
Something?
Sure.
I just wanted to add something to that. When you read the diaries of Beckmann, which of course Puppa edited, she took out all the derogatory remarks of people he didn't like and he met and whatever. But he would work on 10 to 15 paintings at the same time, and he would go back and back and back. Sometimes he painted for 7 months on a picture. I mean, not singly, but he painted many pictures at the same time and went back and changed, etc. So, and he expressed his frustration of changing a different color, a different hand, a different posture of the head, etc. So he never finished until he was content, and that took months.
I would add one more thing. It was not only, as you say, that he was really able to construct, to compose a picture like an old master, but for him it was really a physical act to paint. And he taught this as a teacher to his students, that you have to stand in the right way, you have to hold your hand in the right way, and it's like ballet or like the balanced movement, and you have to be in your perfect balance with your body to be able to paint. It was very important for him, as he stood for 6 hours in the studio, or 12 sometimes, but that was physically very important, and he quoted that several times.
That's fascinating.
are some wonderful photos of actually when the show that Perry Rathbone organized was in Boulder, of both Perry and Max standing in front, and Quappy standing in front of the triptychs, and you see them just size. I mean, they're just in the pictures. They're totally relating to that space in front of which he always worked. I did want to add, I don't think it was Quappy who edited the diaries. I think it was Erhard Goerpel who edited the diaries.
It was Quappy, because the original ones I had Columbia, and I read the original ones, and Quappy in her, I read her letters. I read her letters at the Beckmann, in Munich. Did you read those letters?
I read earlier ones.
Yeah, no. So she really edited, and she expressed that in a way. She didn't want him to look bad because they were, it was the idea of Kurt Valentin that she, in a way, overcome her sorrow that he died, and that she edited his diary so she would still be with him.
Did she not move back to Europe because he died here, do you think? Or
Yes. You see, when she still lived in the apartment they had on 69th Street, she would dream of Beckmann, and she would dream and didn't want to wake up because she talked to him, and she was so committed to him. She left her diaries to Washington, and I read those diaries. They sent them to our library. And in her diaries, she would note today, 1 year ago he died, today, 3 years ago. He would be with her always. And she never looked at another man, and although she wasn't old. She only died in 1986. Wow. And he died in 1950. And so she found solace on 94th Street, that still exists between Madison and Fifth Avenue. There is a sort of...
where is he buried? Sorry.
He is buried in the ocean. Quappy had his ashes in an urn under a painting, and when she died, her ashes were mixed together, and Peter, her son, they went to the Atlantic, and they waited for the wind not to go to Germany, but there was
into their eyes.
yes, the wind came and the ashes flew into their faces. But anyway, she could not live without him, and she found solace in this Hare Krishna whatever, where she volunteered, and then this Indian man who was a holy man, he became her anchor.
I'd love to add something about her devotion, and that is, I got my first lesson in art appreciation, in a way, from Quappy. When I would visit her, she would take me into a little room where she had the Argonauts, his last painting. He had just finished painting it the day he died, and she kept it there, as I recall, in this very small room, and she would take me in there and we'd sit in front of it and not say a word, and I didn't know how long that was supposed to go on.
How old were you?
I don't know, 10. No, I don't remember at Nurn. Yeah. Was that in front of the Argonauts? Okay. I don't remember that. But then, Sabine, when you wrote that J.B. Naumann had been given the same treatment by Beckmann himself, I think you wrote this, and so she was doing the same thing, where you just go and sit in front of the painting and nobody's going to explain it.
I could add a nice story to that, because Quappy was so devoted to this Argonauts triptych. Klaus Galbitz, former director of the Städel Museum in Frankfurt, organized in 1983, I think, this amazing show with the triptychs, all of the triptychs. And Quappy wouldn't give him the Argonauts because she was so close to it. And I read a letter when Klaus Galbitz offered her to put a bed in the museum so she could sleep with the Argonaut triptych.
Too much Quappy, I have to say. Sending me over the top. Okay, well, okay. I have one question which I would like to ask all of you about the format of the pictures. We're moving on from puppy back to the painting. These very narrow, strange formats. Richard, do you want to start? Does anyone have any insight or?
I just have an insight, not about format, but I just want to.
All right, just any other insight would do.
This is an insight. One of the things that strikes me about Beckmann is, of all the German artists of his generation that he grew up with and knew, and were all part of that artistic circle in Berlin in the 20s and early 30s, when the Nazis came to power, all these other artists, Dix, Lotte Glaserstein, who I just discovered, who I adore, Groats, they were so devastated. They must have had such incredible emotional shattering from what happened that in some ways they changed. No matter whether they stayed in Germany or whether they went elsewhere. Lotte Glaserstein went to I think Denmark. She went to someplace in Scandinavia where her family was from. But they all got, it almost like they turned inward and they got softer and they got, I don't want to say weaker, but it's like they lost the guts they had when they were in Germany, in Berlin in the 20s. Beckmann got gutsier. He left, he got stronger, he got bolder. Unlike anybody else, he became an even tougher version of the way he was in the 20s. I think that's very interesting. It shows you tremendous personal fortitude, I think.
Thank you, Carl.